The reason I decided to title my presentation Vaicitrya is because of the multitude of meanings definitions that this term has. So Vaicitrya, which is a Sanskrit term, it's a masculine noun, and it can refer to strangeness, it could refer to variety, it could refer to wonderfulness, and it could also refer to multitude. So the painting that I have put in the background, it also has a variety of emotions. So this is from the Satsai of Bihari, the collection of 700 verses. And he mentions this episode when the Naika, she was bathing at the terrace of her home, and she was joined by two Sakhis who were helping her in becoming the most beautiful maiden in the realm. So, with her porcelain white skin, with her moonlit facial complexions, with her angular body proportions, and her aquiline nose, she was bathing herself, and suddenly she hears a footstep. Her first expression is of bewilderment. She is bewildered who has entered her private dominion when she is supposed to be on her own. And then she enters a state of strangeness. She becomes estranged. She's caught up in the moment. She's bewildered, and then she is fearful, as if some intruder has entered her private apartments. And then she's curious to see who's the person who has entered her private apartment, and it's when she sees Krishna. And finally, her bewilderness, her fears, her reservations turn into joy. She's joyous, and she enters a state of merriment. So, this variety of emotions that she faces in such a quick span of time is what is faced by numerous scholars when they encounter paintings from the northern western Himalayas. So, on first instance, the very first glance, when we look at these very small paintings, these miniature paintings, where facial features are as small as the nail on your thumb, and these painters, they have managed to breathe life into such small scale figures. It's unparalleled. It is second to none. So when Kumaraswamy he described paintings, he says he called Rajput painting when no such binary Rajasthani and Pahari existed back in the day. He says these paintings, they create such a world where all men are heroic, all women are beautiful and shy, and every animal, wild and tame, is the friend of man. The trees, the waterfalls, the cloud, everything, they follow faithfully the footsteps of the bridegroom as he passes by. But he says that this world is not of fancy, it rather exists, but it is visible only to those who can see with the transfiguring eyes of love. So, my endeavor here is to create such an atmosphere in a very humble manner. I shall show some very quirky paintings belonging to different schools of Pahari painting. And then we shall be discussing the minute details which make these very few hand-picked artifacts stand out in bunch of paintings scattered through various collections and galleries. This is a very interesting painting, in my opinion. It is from Basoli, and it also refers to the hesitation that I am facing partly, and it perfectly captures my state of mind at the moment. So this is the Madhya Visarika, and since she's a Madhya, so her bashfulness and her desire to passionately make love with the Nayaka are in equal measures. So she steps out in the middle of the night from her house to meet the Nayaka, who is represented as Krishna in the composition by the painter. And when she sees the Nayaka says, "Oh, my Naike, when you set out from your house in the dead of the night at such an ungodly hour, you must have faced so many different difficulties on your way here, the hurdles that you faced. There was a downpouring torrent from the sky, there was thunderous lightning that must have been quite fearful to you. There were scavengers of the night crawling about that you must have been that you must have been feeling on your feet. Your clothes are torn by the thorny bushes that you encountered on your way. And who knows what sort of ghouls you must have seen while you were coming here to see me. You faced all these hurdles and now you are here. but at my very touch, why do you tremble now? So while she was being all brave and everything, so her desire to make love to the Nayaka had taken over. But the moment she sees him, so now she's completely bedazzled. And now she's shivering, she's trembling. This sort of a hesitation is faced by a lot of people. And such challenges do exist when one has to specify Guler from Kangra, because there are no hard lined rules as to where Guler painting, where Guler tradition cease to exist, and where we start calling those paintings Kangra. If a painting is made by a Mandi master, but the painting was found at Chamba, not in the royal collection, but in the collection of some painter family who were living at Chamba, do we call them Mandi painting or do we call them Chamba paintings? So there are many questions that still remain unanswered. And I'm certain that future generations of art historians would be helpful in creating such distinction. But why is there such a need to start labeling these paintings as school A, school B, school C, school D? So when in the early 20th century, private collectors started emerging and started collecting paintings from the Mughal dominion, from Awadh, from Rajasthan, from the Deccan, and from the Pahari hills, known as Punjab hills previously. Now it is an obsolete term. So this phenomena was very much similar to how somebody would collect stamps. Now you are a stamp collector, that's good for you, and now you need to classify them. So this is an Indian stamp, that's a American stamp, that's a European stamp. This stamp was started in China. So these stamps, they belong to the 1940s, these stamps belong to 1950s. Those stamps were discontinued in 1960s, purely for classification purpose, purely for cataloging purpose. So prior to it, if a painter was active in Chamba in the 17th century and he was making a painting, he was not aware that he was making a Chamba painting. He was just making a painting. If you see the genealogical scrolls in Haridwar, in Kurukshetra, in Pihova, those people, they call themselves Chitere, the painters who were active in these dominions. So if you pick up the scroll of Basoli, and you might encounter a name or two, Chitere Basoli ke. But if a painter who was working for the Guler court, if he migrates, when he migrated to Basoli during the reign of Raja Mahendrapal, they started calling themselves Chitere Basoli ke, because Basoli was their new home. They left their Guler tag back home to their fathers, brothers, sons who were still active at Guler. So these are modern sensibilities. These are modern phenomena. The division of paintings into schools, and the only purpose that these serve is to classify, to categorize for cataloging purpose, as it is helpful in museum practices, as well as they are very much beneficial in denoting a price in the art market. So a painting, no matter how beautiful or not beautiful it is, may certainly see a spike in the price if the painting is termed a glare painting, if the painting is termed a Basoli painting, because there are popular schools of painting activity. If the same painting would be called a Bilaspur painting, you might remove a zero from the digits, the price of that painting, because Bilaspur is just not as prevalent or as popular as Guler or Basoli are. And in the beginning, when Kumaraswamy, N.C. Mehta, Khandalawala, and even MS Randhawa, they started categorizing these paintings, cataloging these paintings. They did not give much prevalence to centers such as Chamba, Nurpur, Guler, Basoli, Mandi. There was the Jammu school, which was marked by stylistic primitiveness, or there was a savagery, as Khandalawala calls it, associated with the style. The colors were bright, colors were robust, colors were primary. There was a lot of ochre, reds used in those paintings. So there was the primitive paintings, the Jammu school, the Jammu group, and then there was the beautiful, the soft hues, the angular facial features, the aquiline nose, the long drooping eye instead of the big, bold, protruding eye in the Basoli counterpart right here. So these were only just the two schools. And still to this day, for many people, Kangra is synonymous with Pahari painting. So if somebody says Pahari painting, they mean Kangra painting. If somebody says Kangra painting, they mean Pahari painting. So anyway, let's try to tackle this and focus on the first school that I shall be showing, which is Nurpur. Nurpur is very dear to me because this was the earliest center of painting activity. And many people would assume Basoli to be the earliest school because of how Basoli appears, but that is not the case. Nurpur, as a state, was previously known as Dhameri. And the Miri was reigned by Raja Vasu, sometimes known as Raja Vyasdev, sometimes Raja Vasudev. But Vasu is the name that we find in the genealogical scroll. And the Meri used to be the western frontier of the northwest Himalayas, bordering Punjab on the west. And it was in the 1570s when Akbar sent Raja Todermal, as per his expansionist policy, towards the northern western states and asked every single state to cough up as much territory as they could in their capacity. And the Meri state, Raja Basu at that time gave up Pathankot. Pathankot used to be the capital. That is how the royal house gets the name Pathania, from Pathankot. And Pathankot was given to the Mughals, which became a part of Punjab, and the Meri was left alone. And at that time, Raja Todermal famously wrote a letter to Akbar stating that we have taken the flesh and left the bones for the Pahari Raja. And Raja Vasudev had an elder son. His name was Surajmal. He was Raja for 1 year. Then he fled and left to Chamba, and he was chased by Jahangir's forces, but they gave up halfway because Chamba is surrounded by an altitude of 4,000 meters on four sides. And then Surajmal was succeeded by his younger son, Raja Jagat Singh, right here. It is not a Pahari painting. The painting is made by Vaicitrya, the Mughal portraitist, among the favorites of Jahangir. So Jagat Singh was very close to Jahangir. When Jahangir visited Dhameri in 1621, Jagat Singh famously named his state Nurpur in the honor of Nuruddin Jahangir. And he was showered with a lot of gifts. He was given the title of Raja, and a lot of other favors were bestowed upon him. And when he named his capital Nurpur, the Rajas of Chamba mockingly called him Yavana Sachiva, which is secretary to the Mughals. But he was important enough for Jahangir to have his court portraitist have a portrait made of the king. And this is the earliest portrait of a Pahari Raja that we get. And it's made in such great detail. Look at this fine muslin jama that he's wearing. The detail is unparalleled. Let me show you the cuffs. The painting is presently in the Cleveland Museum of Art. Very fine detailing, minute detailing that we get to see. His expression is very similar to that of the falcon. Okay, so Jagat Singh was a man of evil designs. So immediately after becoming the Raja, he started to take his revenge from Chamba state, where his brother had fled along with the Nurpur state treasury and mysteriously died. We don't know how he passed in Chamba. And then when he called Raja Janardhan Varman of Chamba for a heated debate at Banikhet, he got angry and then pushed his dagger into the Chamba Raja's chest, killing him at the moment. Then the Nurpur forces took over the Chamba royal palace, and they killed every single person over there except for the 4-year-old son Prithvi, who was secretly smuggled to Mandi. And then after this, Nurpur remained Chamba remained in Nurpur clutches for the corresponding 18 years. So the rise of Raja Jagat Singh. And since he was a person of political ambitions, he let those ambitions show in his impetus towards arts as well. So immediately afterwards, he established a painting atelier at Nurpur, and this is the work of a popular Mughal artist for the Nurpur court. We can see there are several Mughal elements in this painting. For example, this highly florally decorated hashia, the pedestal upon which Vishnu and Lakshmi are seated. There is also application of the malachite pigments that could be seen on the blouse of Lakshmi or even the turbans that the young boys are wearing. The turban that he is wearing himself is purely in Jahangir fashion. Fantastic portrait, indeed. And this would be the first Nurpur painting among the early specimen. So presently in the government museum Chandigarh, and this shows Jagat Singh praying at a Vishnu shrine. But look how different the workmanship is now. There is one possibility that the popular Mughal artist, who must have migrated to Nurpur from Lahore, given the close geographic proximity, must have spent some time at Nurpur training local craftsmen into painting, and after getting his work done, he left back to wherever he came from. And this is the first instance of Nurpur painting being made. Now look how things are changing after a few generations. This is Jagat Singh's grandson Mandhata, the Nurpur chief in the last quarter of the 17th century. And now Nurpur painting has taken a completely different flavor. That Mughal flavor is still very much there in terms of their fashion, the turban, the headgears, the patka sash. But from Jahangir period sensibility, we are now we have come to Aurangzeb period sensibilities, where now the turbans are stiff and tight and short, and the jamas are short, the patka sash are short and decorated, and the contemporary fashion appeal could be seen in the portrait, but the workmanship is just not as good as it was back in the reign of Raja Jagat Singh himself. So here's a very famous example. The painting is attributed to Golu of Nurpur, son of Devidas, because family is the basis of style. And it shows a Madhya Swadhina Patika Naika. So Swadhina Patika is the one whose husband is completely devoted to her, and she's a Madhya. So her bashfulness and her desire to make love are in equal measures. So Swadhina Patika would be the one on the left with a nice, highly decorated necklaces and everything. And she's proudly confessing to her Sakhi, her close confidant, that my husband is completely devoted to me. So in the night, in the bedchamber, no matter how many times I utter the word no, he just don't yield and does not let go of the drawstrings of my trousers. And the original verse from Bhanu Datta's Rasamanjari, which is written in Sanskrit. But interestingly, on the verse of this painting, there is also a local Nurpuri translation as well, which is rendered in Takri. And this is what I just paraphrased, the Takri translation of it. So in the Sanskrit one, she just simply says, he doesn't let go of me. That drawstrings of a trouser element is purely added by whoever was the scribe at Nurpur, but adding a completely different flavor to the original composition. And you can see the Nayaka who's standing holding a patka sash in his hand. Perhaps this is the patka sash that she ties to her waist before she goes to sleep. And he has taken it off and now showing it in our faces. But a fantastic composition, nevertheless. The way the space has been divided, the focus completely falls on the two talking, and he's just a character in guest appearance. Now we come to another interesting school, which is Basoli. Basoli paintings need no introduction. Amrita Shergill wrote letters to her mother about Basoli painting. The color schemes are famous all over the world, and especially those beetle wing carapaces, which are applied on these paintings to give the effect of emerald, as we can see in this case. So wherever in these jewelries, in the headgears, the crowns, you see wherever you see these gem-studded small details, these are nothing but beetle wings cut out very carefully by the painter and then applied using gum arabic to create that gem-studded appearance that these jewelries are delivering. Let me show you a better example. Yes, right there. So you can see it in the crown of the Devi. So they appear very that strikingly bright green hue that they are that is emitting from the beetle wing carapaces. They appear beautiful, and look how extensively gold has been applied on the Devi. So this is Bhadrakali, and that is one rishi. So the sage meditating in the forest, and the vegetation, it's beautiful. If you study Gupta period, late Gupta period sculpture reliefs, so we can see such kind of vegetation appearing in those artifacts. So that entire trajectory that this typology has traveled from Gupta sculpture to 17th century miniature painting in the hills. Many people dismiss Basoli painting as being just shoddy or uh, not as competent craftsmanship. But look at the detail that the painter has put in suggesting modeling in the corpse. So very fine stippling has been done. Even in the trees. So every single strand is individually evident. Even in the deer hide, this black buck hide. Truly wonderful composition. So, but the adoration of Bhadrakali by the Hindu male pantheon. So we have Brahma, we have Vishnu, we have Mahesh, and we have Indra with yonis all over his body. She appears very confident as she dances. Uh, she's drinking blood, of course, uh, and the blood is nicely complementing the costume that she's adorning. Those drapes, they look ferociously red, and look how these tresses they fall freely from over her shoulders. Wonderful facial features. She was always beautiful, and she was always in three-quarterly fashion because he has the third eye. Even this little tiger right here. Another representation of Kali. Okay, so these are from the Basoli Rasamanjari. So she is a Prodha Vasaka Sajja. So Prodha means the one who's expert in the art of making love, and she has completely let go of her bashfulness. And she's a Vasaka Sajja, which means she's the one who sets the bed. So she knows how to please her paramour, her beloved. So she applies the most fragrant of the perfumes in her hair. She has made all the fantastic arrangements that is to the liking of her beloved. So beautiful garlands dangling from the wall. There's a fantastic muslin, expensive muslin bed sheets adorning the bed. And then there's this nice floral carpet over there as well. Look at the extensive embellishments that have been done in the building itself. And she has opened the door, kept the door open because she's expecting somebody, but it's only half open. So not anybody's would be welcome in this house. And then here she is, Prodha Vasak Saja. She was Prodha and now she's Mugdha. So Mugdha is the one whose bashfulness has completely taken over her desire to make love. The composition might appear a little disturbing, but it has nothing to do with the subject matter. So, okay, so here are two Sakhis talking amongst one another, and she's a Mugdha Navodha. Navodha means the immature one, and Mugdha is the one who is too bashful to do anything. And here are the two Sakhis talking. They say, "Who asked the Nayaka to marry a woman so young? Whenever she tries to, whenever he tries to get her into his embrace, she runs away. It's almost as if he is trying to balance Mercury over the palm of his hand." So here is Krishna as a Nayaka trying to charm his newlywed wife, and here she is running away. I think just to accentuate the youthfulness of the Navodha, as the name suggests, the artist has scaled her quite short in comparison to Krishna, and this is why this painting looks a little weird. Otherwise, the painter's heart is in the right place, and it's a lovely composition. Look at these trefoil arches, how wonderful these look. Okay, and now she's Madhya Vipralabdha. So she's a Madhya, the one right in the middle. Bashfulness and desire to make love are in a state of equilibrium. And now she's wondering to herself, I had set the bed so well, the bed chamber is so brightly lit. I had given him the perfect time to be here, but he did not show up at all. What must have he been taken with? So let me just casually stand here and eat a pan. And again, look at the vegetation. So the painter uses vegetation in order to create a feeling of seclusion. So this bedchamber, the sanket as they call it in Sanskrit, the place of meeting, the point of rendezvous, is completely hidden from outside world. So she is in a safe space, a secure space, a space hidden away from the external eyes, but just visible enough for us to see, for the beholders to see. The emergence of the Varaha, again attributed to Managu. So Varaha's birth had been prophesized to become the end of Hiranyaksha, the elder brother of Hiranyakashipu. And Hiranyaksha had kidnapped Bhudevi and taken her to the bottom of the ocean. And then Vishnu decided to take the boar form as Varaha, and he emerged from the underworld and see this heavenly rainfall downpour that occurred on Varaha's birth, symbolizing how dangerous he is about to be, a formidable enemy to Hiranyaksha. So there are daggers falling from the sky, maces falling from the sky, axes, swords, whatnot. Even snakes are raining down. It's raining snakes. Bones are falling from sky. Huge rocks are falling from the skies. The ghosts, the ghouls, the Gandharvas, the Asuras, and the Sadhus. Everybody, every single person, every mortal is afraid of Varaha because his intentions are not clear. Whether he is a god or a demon, it's not clear. So everybody's afraid of Varaha and they're running away in any direction that they can find. And the way this diagonal that gets created in the direction of the rain. So all the eye, every single eye, it first falls on Varaha and he emerges out of this composition, done very masterfully. This is another painting by Nansuk. So the court of Zakaria Khan. Uh, so there was a singing and dancing party that was organized for two Turkish convoys who had visited the Nawab, and the women were beautiful. They were dancing, and but the two men they could not control themselves, so they sprang up. They sprung up from their seats and they got the two dancing courtesans into their arms, leading to a very scandalous and a funny, humorous encounter. So look at how these people they're responding to this exchange. So of course the women they are scandalized. So this one she's trying to hide her face because she has been taken with embarrassment. And this one, she is trying to balance herself as she falls down. And lustful expression on the faces of the two gentlemen. And so this one is annoyed. I did not sign up for this. This one is scandalized. He is covering his face in horror. And this one is plain laughing. So he has gotten his teeth out and everything, laughing through his teeth. The old Nawab, he is almost falling down, laughing at the moment. Even his teeth are visible. And then there is his big boned counterpart. So he has put one hand on his belly as he laughs out loud. And similar expression could be seen on the faces of the attendants in the back. A fantastic composition. Colors are applied only where absolutely necessary. There is no background, there is no backdrop in this painting. So it serves like a theatrical spotlight. So the light falls, the gaze falls only on those elements, only on those figures which are worth observing, which are worth seeing, and everything else is just plain and bland and completely invisible. Here is another painting. So Raja Balwant Singh of Jasrota, he is visiting his palace. So rather than showing the Raja in the conventional manner, just a figure surrounded by a few figures going towards a place, he puts the palatial complex in the center stage, and then uses little, very faint color scheme to denote the Raja in the entire composition, who is marked with his white jama. And then there is a peacock on the top of the palace. So again, eyes must fall only where it is absolutely necessary. Everything else is just extra detail. Wonderful composition. Okay, so these are personal favorites. So made by the sons of Nansuk for the Chamba court, the set of Usha and Anirudh. So Usha was the daughter of the demon Banasura, and she had received a boon from Krishna that her husband would be as beautiful as Shiva. She had received a boon from Shiva that her husband would be as beautiful as Shiva himself. So one time she saw a young man in her dream who happened to be the grandson of Krishna by the name Aniruddha, and she fell in love with him. And then Aniruddha was brought to Usha's palace at night, and then they both ended up in an amorous situation. And here are the Sakhis surrounding Usha as she woke up abruptly from her sleep, and they are showing different expressions. Somebody is concerned, somebody is shy, somebody is laughing. So all of them, they have different expressions, different ways of responding to the young princess being woken up by her bed by her sleep all of a sudden. Look how fragile she appears, how gentle she is. So there's that Urdu expression, nazuk, the delicate porcelain white princess. So when Usha met Aniruddha and then Banasur asked for Aniruddha to be kidnapped, to be captured by his army, and then suddenly, all of a sudden, they start seeing all these bad omens. There was an eclipse in the sky. Dark, rainy clouds had started gathering at the horizon. Their standard had fallen from the flag post. Trees had started falling around them. Jackals started throwing fire, breathing fire. Cats were fighting. All these bad omens are to be seen here. So Banasura, he's as calm as he could be, and his sidekick, the Wazir Kumbhand, the demon, he's urging his master to take necessary appropriate actions. Otherwise, something evil is about to befall upon us. And he's like, nothing's gonna happen to me. Look at these demons. Glare artists actually marvel. They marvel the beholder when it comes to depicting the demons. No two demons would ever look the same in glare painting. They really go creative with depicting the demons in their paintings. This one is scared. Okay, so the next painting is another one of my favorites. So he Kumbhan requests his master to take appropriate action, but instead of following suit, see what he does. He enters the harem. He is in the company of his queens, the consorts. They are bringing to him sugar, spice, and everything nice. The painting is damaged, unfortunately. So he is being treated to a wine party, and look what is depicted outside. So it's the same demon, Kumbhand, his vizier. He's actually looking at us, the viewers, in this composition, in a rather complaining manner. So he looks at us, he's grinding his teeth, and he's conveying the expression that, what did I ask the bastard? And look what he's doing. Just this section segment was my phone wallpaper for such a long time. Fantastic painting. Look how the space is divided into two-thirds. So the inner chamber takes the predomination, and then the out of the chamber, outside passage, where Kumbhand is sitting in a contemplating manner, is the one-third of the composition. Another detail showing the various demons, suggestive of different expressions. So Banasura gets tired of Aniruddha, and he just says, "Go and kill him." And then all these demons, they are so happy. They are so happy. They haven't taken a soul in such a long time, and now the time has arrived. So they're actually thinking what kind of different ways would they be able to kill Aniruddha. So these two, they are just happy to be obeying their master. Look at the many arms of Banasur. Imagine them, all of them moving simultaneously. They are just glad to be serving their master. Look how happy these are. He is the one who's contemplating silently whether he should be cutting his arm first or his legs first or just the throat in the very first smite. All of them seem friendly rather. But this is what happened. So a vulgar display of toxic masculinity. So Aniruddha arrives with his sword, and since he's the grandson of Krishna, of course he's supposed to kill all the demons, right? Because he's the grandson of Krishna, and Krishna is an incarnation of Vishnu. And he starts killing all these demons like carrots and radishes. Fantastic representation. And see how these hordes they are now running back. And here is Usha, happy as she could ever be. Another detail of the demons running away. Here's the company salute, and then they're just on their way. So now we come to the final phase of Pahari painting, that is Kangra. So Kangra painting is the ones which are the most beautiful. So all the paintings which are made on the theme of love are were made in Kangra. So the patrons of Kangra, be it Sansar Chand, Anirudh Chand, they were huge. They used to fancy poetry a lot, especially Hindi poetry, Braj poetry, poetry of Keshav Das, poetry of Matiram, uh, Bihari, Ras Khan, and fantastic paintings were made on these poetries. So this Virahani Naika, for example. So she's seated, this beautiful Naika with an expression of melancholy on her face. She's sitting by a riverside on the bank of a river, rather a lotus pond, and she's thinking something with a longing expression on her face. A wonderful tree stands tall, sheltering her from hurt or whatever that she is feeling, and she is clutching a lotus leaf as if her life depends upon it. The lotus leaves are famous, or rather infamous, for letting water droplets slip from them. So nothing can ever settle on a lotus leaf. And she might be feeling as if love is also slipping from her grasp. So she is trying to hold this lotus leaf next to her as dearly as she could. She has a wonderful expression. Every time I look at this painting, I get goosebumps. In the Cleveland Museum of Art, fantastic painting. So this is Raga Hindola. So Hindola is supposed to be a springtime, summertime rag, and supposed to be sung in the daytime. And Hindola is personified by the painters of Kangra as Krishna and Radha riding a swing. That is what Hindol means. And beg your pardon. So here's a celebration in Vrindavan, away from the urban life of Braj. So here we can see they're in seclusion, secluded with this rows of areas of trees in the back. And the Gopas, they are in a state of merriment. Even the cows are having a fun time. And all these Sakhis, the Gopis, they're laughing jokingly amongst one another. Who knows what they're murmuring to each other. And here is Radha and Krishna and Radha, completely lost in each other. And here's the singing and dancing party. So a very joyous, highly merry image. Such joy. Bright yellow to signify spring in the ground. And there is a chamba rumal as well. So a chamba rumal cover it is being used by this Sakhi to as she brings along delicacies for the Gopas to enjoy. So again, the self-referential nature of art is playing a role here. Chamba rumal tradition emerged from painting, and now there are references being made to chamba rumal in the painting itself. So sort of a meta art thing. And again, another beautiful painting. So the paintings that we saw, paintings from Kangra, paintings from Guled, paintings from Mandi, Chamba, Basoli, Nurpur. So when these paintings were being made, a representation of love, as I mentioned Kumaraswamy's quote in the beginning. Uh, but so this was the kind of an atmosphere when these paintings were being patronized by the princes, by the kings, in these nice, airy marble terraces of their palaces. So if you have to imagine, just for an instance, picture yourself being a young prince in Tehra Sujanpur in early 19th century. So your father is the king. There's not a worry in the world, and all you do all day is ride horses and be in company of other princes from different states. And by late evening, you retire to the inner quarters of the palace. So yes, you retire to the inner quarters of the palace, to the marble terrace of the outer balcony, and then you are surrounded by the finest looking attendants that one could ever desire. So look at this party right here. So a cool, gentle evening breeze is blowing from the east. The Tibetan wind is blowing through the from the east, and everything is cool, everything is calm, everything is serene. We can see traces of early evening moon that could be seen in the sky. Then there are women laughing, exchanging whispers, murmurings, and the sounds of their whispers get dissolved in the sprouting fountains, which are being treaded by these wonderfully proud ducks. There's a lovely cat, not creating nuisance. And then here is one attendant applying mahavar to the feet of your consort. And her eyes lock into yours, and you are just looking at her admiringly, holding her close to yourself. And as you unwillingly or unintentionally lift one hand to pick up a pan, she wholeheartedly offers you hers after kissing it with her lips. So that mischief, the entire idea of mischief, Shringar, the eroticism which is there to be seen in this painting, was very much true and it was very much real, but it must have been visible to only those, as Kumaraswamy said, the ones who could see with the transfiguring eyes of love. So, with this, I end my presentation. Thank you very much, and now I can be taking questions.
Start with a few questions of my own that I had in my mind. The first is, why so many paintings from Cleveland Museum? What's the story there? What's the catch there?
Well, I used to work at the Cleveland Museum of Art, and I've seen many of these paintings in person. That is why. And
That
as we
explains
speak
it.
of it, I am working on the Pahari catalog of Cleveland Museum of Art. So I'm looking at these paintings almost on a daily basis.
That explains it because I look at your paintings, and even when we had to promote the lecture, and I was asking you for pictures that you wanted me to put on the poster, it was all
They're always
Cleveland Museum,
they're
and
always
I
from the
was
Cleveland
wondering how.
Museum. Yeah, because I've seen those paintings in the person. Yeah, in person. That is why.
That explains it. But no, beautiful paintings and a wonderful, enviable collection. One often wonders how much of the repository lies there in Cleveland. At Speaking Archaeologically, we've started this small initiative that I remember talking to you about sometime last year, where we're trying to put a catalog together of the Pahari paintings. Not a catalog as a publishing catalog per se, but a sort of a research database where all researchers who are studying art can upload whatever painting they're looking at, and they can record details such as the accession number, the descriptions, or any references that they might need. And they can
Mm.
always open this catalog from their own laptops with their own Gmail accounts, and they can use all that information for future researches. So, in case anybody is interested in that kind of thing, please let me know in the WhatsApp group, and I'll be very happy to share that with you so that you can put in all the artwork that you were studying rather than storing it on your hard drive and letting it cloud your computers, because artwork can be really heavy files as well. So rather than having that in notes and flashcards and some kind of a software elsewhere that just occupies memory on your laptop, it's a safe way to put it on cloud. And you can also look at other stuff that other researchers who've connected with us over the years have uploaded onto the database, and you can sort of use that to accent your own research in Pahari miniatures. So moving on from that, I think I was very taken with that one particular painting where you had a chamba rumal reflected in a painting. And as you said, chamba rumals emerged from miniature paintings to begin with. Rather, I read somewhere that the women of Chamba felt that they needed an outlet for art as well. And while the men did the paintings, the women sat down and they embroidered, which is what they were good at. And one wonders how these expressions of meta art, as you say, came about. And do you have any other instances in Pahari miniatures that you may have encountered where you have other art forms perhaps that sort of featured boldly, and art forms which have a GI tag in their own right?
None that I could think of. There are a few references to metalsmiths, but that is depending on the reference that the painting is trying to make in that context. So there is a painting depicting the sage Ravidas, and he is shown functioning as a carpenter. So that's a reference to wood carving, but again, depending on the context of what the painting is trying to refer to. So in that way, we see a few paintings like that. But this Chambarumal thing, yeah, this is unparalleled. This is unprecedented. I recently wrote a short piece for Gyan Prava, making references to the self-referential aspect of party painting. Once it's published, I shall be sharing it with you, and then you can put it in my group.
I'd love to do that. I think everybody here would love to read that, because art history works very closely with archaeology, which is what we deal with at Speaking Archaeologically. And while one who's studying art history for art historic purposes might look at the styles, the different ways the paintings have been executed, the material of make, what archaeologists generally try to look at is if these paintings can be dated, if the material of make can be useful to determine trade contacts between different groups of, say, the hill rajas, for example, here, or what that tells us about migration and human networking. It also is a very good insight about the type of scripts one deals with in these paintings. And as your painting showed, there were variants of Tankri that one could observe here. So not just the regular Chambyali Tankri, but other scripts as well, other related associated scripts. And not a lot of people realize that Tankri also has variants, just like Pahari schools have so many sub schools under them. Tankri is yet another set of script that's not standardized as such. You can't know one particular thing and just expect to know everything else. There are variants that you need to be mindful of and careful of. So my second question revolves around the depiction of a cat. And Professor B.N. Goswami's last lecture was on depiction of cats, because that was apparently his last book, the one that he released at the Government Museum in Chandigarh, and we were at that lecture. Could you tell me about any other animals which find a rather fantastic depiction in art such as this, and what the artist was probably thinking about while including it? Was the artist just painting something for the heck of it, or was there a deeper motive or a more nuanced approach to the motif itself?
Certain birds and animals, fauna in many manners, is used metaphorically by painters. For example, parrots would always be depicted in pairs of two. In many cases, peacocks would be depicted in the pairs of two to suggest union. So it's believed that if a single bird is shown, then that would denote separation. But that is for the birds. And when it comes to animals, so yeah, Krishna paintings would always have cows going around for obvious reasons because the narrative says so. But otherwise, fauna has contributed very little unless it has been mentioned in the text. Or if there's a portrait and there's a king seated with his English breed dog or whatnot. But otherwise, no. There's a very interesting sketch that I remember, which is attributed to Manuku of Guler. It's from the Bhagavad Puran, and it shows how different sort of animals came into being. If I find it, I will share it with you. So there are dogs, apes, different sort of things. Then there is a very conspicuous, very curious looking animal that is depicted. A mongoose is there, and in
Oh,
Takri they have written Noru, which is Pahari for Nevla. So that is something that I found quite interesting. Yeah.
that's amusing. I think I recently encountered this. I think it's been there on display for a while. At the Chandigarh Museum, there's this catalog of Pahari birds. So they did caricatures of different kind of birds that you find in the hilly regions. And that's a very interesting study as well. One wonders what made somebody commission that. Was it just bird watching like I do on a daily basis? Or was there a deeper meaning to it? Was it an artist practicing his craft perhaps? So the animal depictions are very fascinating.
Even horses for that matter, like the Shalihotra Samhita, that's a very important set of paintings showing various horse diseases and how to cure them. Yeah, but
I'm
then
glad you
again, that
mentioned
isn't
that.
like,
You curated
yeah,
that particular collection for Government Museum,
I
Chandigarh.
did. I did back in the day.
That's a very interesting manuscript in itself. Why would one get the horse illnesses illustrated? Was it for um, just to put the, because again, the people commissioning these paintings, these manuscripts, one must understand they're not regular people. They're
Hmm.
generally well-off people. They're rajas and they're people high up in the royal administration in the hill states. So why would one get that commission? Was it an instruction manual to somebody else to cure the horses? Was it for instructional purposes also? Or was it for just keeping the painters in practice and making sure that what they were paying to these painters was due? I
Absolutely.
came across a manuscript in the Dogra Museum in Jammu, again, a Persian slash Takri translation to the same, where there are excruciatingly painful looking paintings that show how to play a sitar and how to play a veena. So you have bleeding fingers and bleeding hands and all of that. And all of that has been depicted. And there's this wonderful epigraph next to it that talks about what happens if you hold the string wrong and
Right.
how to avoid those kind of injuries while playing an instrument.
Quite fantastic. Yeah.
So my next question, until we wait for other people for questions, is you mentioned the controversy around Manaku, Nansuk's brother.
Absolutely.
And there's a picture on Manku. There's a book on Manku. There's a picture on Nansuk, and art historians before you have tried to address that. So how do you think? What do you think is the one identifying factor when we're dealing with this ambiguity in the name? How do you separate Manku, Nansuk's brother, from the other attributions to the same name?
Yeah, I truly believe that Manku and Manak, they're two different individuals. There is a portrait in Basoli, and it shows the Natha Pandit or Natha Wazir, a person of such designation, and he's standing next to an individual by the name Manaku. The painting is in Basoli style, datable to around the first quarter of the 18th century. I tried to look for traces about some Manaku individual in the Haridwar Bahis of Basoli state, Bilawar. I could not find anything. But his name is mentioned as Manaku, the same name that we find in that inscription in the NC Mehta Basoli Gita Govinda painting. That is also Manaku. And for a long time, scholarship used to believe that Manku was some woman who commissioned the Gita Govinda painting set. But then it was considered rubbish by later studies by N.C. Mehta, Karl Khandalawala. So it was B.N. Goswami who very recently attributed all those paintings to Nansuk's brother Manak because of his lifelong fascination with the Gulir painter family. So immediately after writing, before proceeding his work on the theory family as the basis of style in the mid 60s, Professor Goswami took the case study of the Gulir painter family because of his immediate infatuation with Nansuk's work. So he has this sort of a habit. So he would pick one painter and then create the entire family genealogical tree. And since paintings are supposed to be transferred from one generation to the next in strictly biological fashion, so all those paintings that look similar are to be clubbed together. Nansuk, other than his brother Manak, had his uncle's sons as well. Pandit Seu's brother also had his own children, who must have also been painters. We don't know for sure because we don't find any paintings bearing their names. And we don't find a single painting bearing Pandit Seu's name. So we don't know what he made. So if he was a painter, then what kind of paintings he was making. So the entire bunch that has been attributed to Pandit Seu is questionable in my opinion. A very famous portrait that Professor Goswami published in Pahari Masters as well as Nansuk of Guler was that of Pandit Seu. So he calls it Pandit Seu's portrait, either self-portrait or made by Nansuk, something of that sort. Recently, I stumbled upon the portrait of Raja Abhiras Singh of Jaswant, and those two are exactly the same. Those two portraits are exactly the same. So the Pandit Seu inscription has been added incorrectly. And that portrait is not even in Blair style. So there's a strong possibility that even this Manku attribution is an erroneous interpretation on part of Goswami's own scholarly findings. It's quite controversial, but I would choose to separate Manku with Manak because you can change your style. When I discussed this with Professor Goswami back in 2018, so he dismissed me by saying that even your father paints in diverse array of styles. So how do you explain that? So even though style could be different, application of color, so these minor intricacies like application of color, the way you divide the border, the way you apply stippling, you can't change these mannerisms because you're born with it. So it is something which is so deeply ingrained that these can't be controlled. So on this basis, the Manaku of Gita Govinda and the Manak who has signed only two paintings in his life, they appear to be completely separate entities. So these are just my 2 cents on the issue. I completely refuse to believe that Manaku and Manak are the same people.
That's interesting. That's quite a raging controversy because when you look at those paintings, like you said, the style is starkly different. And you wouldn't change the entire style, no matter where you migrated or what style you were trying to emulate. I think there are certain things that a painter is born with, like you said, and it's very difficult to change it with whatever the undercurrent may be in the artistic scenario. So we have a few questions flooding in. So Minati Verma wants to know the depiction of the figure on which Bhadrakali is sitting from the painting of Bhadrakali um, has its whole head hidden by foliage. What could this signify in terms of symbolism?
I don't think it adds anything to it because there are other portraits of Bhadrakali as well, in which she is again standing upon a corpse and the head is facing towards the ground. I think this is done in the painting just to create space for the composition. Otherwise, it would have been too clubbed. So most of the early Basoli paintings, they are in squarish format. So when the painter must have tried to create the composition, so he must have run out of space, and just to allocate enough space for the one rishi to be depicted in the composition, there were certain compromises that were made on part of the artist.
Thank you so much for that answer. We have another question, which I think Harsh asks, and it's a general question, I think, which is what time frame do you associate with all these paintings? So, starting from the beginning of the first party painting till the culmination. I don't think there's a culmination because, like we all know, I think we both specifically know that these families still exist. The painters are still there. You are
Absolutely.
son of one such painter yourself, and an illustrious painter at that. So, what would be the starting time frame? When is it exactly that we attribute the birth of Pahari paintings to?
Certainly during the first quarter of the 17th century, so around 1625 to 1630, we start seeing paintings being commissioned at Nurpur, at the Chamba court, in even in Mandi. And so that shall be the beginning period of Pahari painting. But then Pahari painting entered as an era of high production during early 18th century, when there were other schools, other centers emerging up, such as Guler and Jisrota, Bilaspur. So that was the most prolific period of painting production in the Pahari Hills. And by 1820, 1830, almost every single Pahari state was having paintings commissioned, even Nahan and Urki for that matter, before completely being taken over by the company masters or the European masters. So that could be said as the culminating point of Pahari painting, the mid to late 19th century.
That's very interesting. I'm glad you mentioned the Arki school particularly because I recently bumped into somebody who claimed to come from a family of the Nalagarh School of Art. And I had never heard of it. I've only ever come across one painting, I think, which is pronounced Nalagarh, and I think that's in the museum in Thanesar in Haryana. And I think there's another one in National Museum at Delhi. But again, because the paintings are so sparse, one often wonders whether it's a separate school in itself or is it just a group of people who relocated and who were painting at that time. There's also this very big dichotomy of where the Pahadi frescoes fit in with respect to the miniature paintings because the frescoes are also of the same style. Indeed, if you look at Sujanpur Tira, the remains that are left now of the palace, as well as temples like Gauri Shankar Temple and the Narbadeshwar Temple there, One finds a lot of these paintings on the walls of these temples as well as frescoes. And one wonders, where does that distinction come from? Were these people doing those paintings at the same time as they were making miniatures on paper? Or were they exclusive artists that dealt with frescoes and a separate atelier that dealt with the miniatures on paper?
No, they were the same people. So a Pahari fresco or a Pahari mural is nothing but a Pahari painting pasted on a wall. So it's just a bigger space, nothing else. So the binder is different. Otherwise, the composition is just the same. So you just take a painting, think of it as think of it as a stencil. So here's a stencil, a template. You took it from the paper, you pasted it on the wall, and you drew along with it, and then you get a Pahari fresco. So there is no difference at all. The people who made murals at Devi Kothi were Jhanda and Gurudev. They were miniaturists, but they were commissioned with making frescoes, so they did that. So the same guild of people doing all that kind of stuff.
That's very interesting because you have these frescoes scattered around different places in Himachal, and not all of them have protection. Not all of them are in very well known places as well. You've recently encountered one. I've encountered
Yeah.
one in the Solin Hills as well. And it's surprising that you had so many of them, and people in general are oblivious to it. And of course, there are traces of different styles and different stylistic variations there. So one often wonders how much there is left to be studied in terms of them. Kritika asks, why do most of these paintings have side facing figures like the Mughal paintings?
So that was the norm during the reign of Jahangir. So when we entered, so see, I have this. It's just my theory, a very meager, very humble one. When we look at paintings belonging to the reign of Akbar, so all the faces they are in a three-quarterly manner. So it's very similar since those paintings, that sensibility originated from Persian painting. And in Persian painting, you always look at the beholder, even though you are facing another person, that you are talking to somebody else. So it's very similar to how things move in theater. So you acknowledge the presence of the beholder, and then you also acknowledge the presence of whoever you are speaking to. So you always stand in this three-quarterly fashion to create a space for everybody. So that feature, that manner, it invites you inside the composition. So you feel yourself to be a part of that scene. So that's how you get dragged into the composition. When we enter the reign of Jahangir, I believe it has a lot to do with Jahangir's own personality. He was a very reclusive person. He was a very reserved man. And in a way, by consciously choosing to depict Jahangir facing towards the side, he completely shuns you away from the composition. There is that invisible barrier that you feel. So you are no more invited, you are no more welcome inside the composition. So there is a distance which is maintained between you and the emperor. So that's how he maintains his own supremacy psychologically. So when we look at these paintings, and when we look at the earliest Pahari paintings, so these sensibilities are happening simultaneously. The painters who were active for the Mughal court, they started migrating towards the hills, and the early foundation of Pahari painting were laid. And since this manner of depicting people facing towards the side was a norm at that period, this with the passage of time became a convention in Pahari painting. So this is the history of it, in my interpretation.
Thank you. That's a wonderful interpretation. I think one that I can agree with to quite an extent. My related question to this, or my follow up question for this, is how much do you attribute the political happenings of the area at that time to the spread of the art of miniatures?
Absolutely, they were mirroring each other quite well. Rather, the courts which were more familiar with Mughal court culture, for example, Nurpur and Chamba, they became the most prolific and the earliest center of painting activity. And the courts that never came into contact with the Mughals, such as Rampur Bushahar and the courts towards the southern Himachal belt, they had either they did not have painting tradition at all, and if it emerged quite late. So you see, you never see 17th century Gadwal paintings at all because they had no exchange with the Mughals. We get to see Bilaspur paintings because the Bilaspur Rajas they were fighting on the behalf of Aurangzeb with Guru Gobind Singh. So all the courts that came into contact with the Mughals, who had a diplomatic exchange with the Mughals, they started commissioning paintings, and the courts who had nothing to do with the Mughals, they never had painting tradition flourishing in their atelier. That is there, yeah. So the political situations mirror themselves, manifest themselves in the painting sensibility as well.
Was there also ever a capture of artists and or a movement of artists and in their patronage in another case? So, for example, there are quite a few cases where you have instances of one Raja marrying his daughter off to another Raja in the hill states, and then she brings her own set of artisans with her, including the people who make her shoes. So, there's a very famous story about the Chamba Chappal, which says because the
Yeah,
Nurpur's daughter, the Raja Nurpur's daughter was married to one of the Chambyal kings, and she couldn't bear being barefooted here. She brought in her own set of people to make her own shoes, and that's how the Chamba Chappal began. So, do you
yeah.
have that in art history, in paintings as well?
Most likely, there's a strong possibility that this would happen almost all the time, and not even just wives bringing matrimonial alliances leading to migration of painters, even diplomatic associations as well, or political instabilities would force painters to relocate from one point to the other. The three sons of Nansuk, they had to force themselves to be relocated in Chamba after the downfall of Guler, because Guler had entered a state of bankruptcy. And since the Raja of Guler at that time, he was the brother-in-law of Raja Rasing of Chamba, he urged Raja Rasing to give shelter to these three young painters. And that is how Guler painting started flourishing in Chamba by the second half of the 18th century. So, yes, these things would exist on a regular basis, and painters would migrate from point A to point B all the time.
Are there written records that sort of testify that even
We
further,
do,
or it's just conjectural?
we do. There is a copper plate charter suggesting a land grant made in the name of Nansuk to his son Ranja, Ramsahai. Yes, so we do have documentary evidence. There was this book written by Vijay Sharma and B.C. Ohri, Takri documents in the Bhuri Singh Museum, Chamba. So they have a few letters that were exchanged between the Raja of Chamba and Guler, suggestive of this migration of painters that took place.
That's very interesting. I mean, one of the reasons I asked is I have that book on me, and that's one of my favorite go-to books. Also, it's authored by your father. It's a brilliant book. It's a brilliant insight, and especially in a day and age where most of the Pahari Rajas did not believe in having written records, you have the Chamba Rajas giving you extensive literature, right from their family genealogy to where they trace their descent from to everything else that follows. I think they have done a brilliant job of copper plate inscriptions and letters. I think the Bhuri Singh Museum in Chamba has this fantastic display of letters as well. And I remember the last time you spoke to us, you did show us one of the copper plate inscriptions that somebody owned in their family as well. So it one just wonders out of curiosity how much the painters feature in such letters and such detailed documents. We have another question from Abhinav Misra who says, thank you so much for this fantastic presentation. My question is about the square composition of Basholi Devi series. What possibly could be the reason behind it? Also, there were some dead bodies or shava on which the Devi stands, but most of the time the legs move outside the margins. Is this just an artistic choice, or there were some ideas of belonging but not belonging behind it?
No, I don't think there was. It has some deeper symbolic or typological context. Rather, this is just the artist trying to create space which he did not believe, which he did not plan beforehand. We see such kind of things happening in Basoli Ragamala paintings as well. So there is a Ragini Sandehi, and she is supposed to deliver a letter to a postman. Sandesh, so she's delivering a Sandesh, a message through the messenger. And the artist, since he did not plan his space accordingly, so we see the roof of the house getting out of one border, or the postman's leg coming out of another border. In some Bhagavad Puran paintings, we see Krishna smiting Kansa's wrestlers, and the wrestler's head is emerging out of the border. It's purely a composition choice, uh, compositional necessity rather than being a choice for not planning the compositions beforehand. And why the paintings were made in a squarish format, uh, I don't know for sure. Nobody does. There have been no written explanations that I've encountered so far. It's just how they would fancy having paintings made in this particular fashion. And a large bulk of Basoli, early Basoli, and even early Chamba paintings are made in a square format. There is no explanation for this phenomenon.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. I think that clarifies your question, Abhinav. My absolute last question, and we can then let you go because you've spent a lot of time talking to us, is and this might come across as a very frivolous question. You were named after a Rag Sarang.
Right.
Do you have a Pahadi miniature that's a personal favorite and that depicts Rag Sarang?
No, I absolutely do not like rag sarang personifications because sarang is supposed to be a summer rag. I despise summers. And rag sarang's iconography is of a woman churning butter. There's nothing fancy in it. So just a plain background, plain summer backdrop, monochromatic. Then there's a woman churning butter, and then there's a soldier standing awkwardly next to her so that when she's done, he can ask for a fill. So
Have you
no, I
never
don't
come
like.
across anything more exciting than that? Because that's one of the most
Never
common
did.
depictions you see. Every time you encounter this in any museum collection, no matter where in the world, it's always the woman churning butter. Always.
Yeah, I do like the sound of rag Vrindavani sarang, but when it comes to paintings, I absolutely despise looking at rag sarang paintings. Yeah.
No, that's why I wanted to ask you that. Have you come across a painting? If yes, please share it with me. If it's an interesting depiction,
I hope
do
I
send it
do. I
across.
I hope I do. Just to support my own ego. I hope I do. But I never did so far, which is shameful.
No, it's difficult. There are certain rags which are depicted in a very weird fashion, if one might say. I think Dev Gandhara Rag is yet another which has never really had a very nice depiction. So while you have very beautiful depictions of Asavari Ragini and other people
Absolutely.
depicted in the rags, when you encounter Dev Gandhara, sometimes the imagery shocks you, and it's always a dark background. So that's
Right.
something that I find very disturbing. One finds dark backgrounds in Abhisarika Naikas as well, the Krishna Abhisarika famously, but they're so well composed and so beautifully done. And then you have Dev Gandhar, which is just a lot of gray, lots of blues, and nothing really visible. Sometimes you fail with even the best of cameras to capture it.
Absolutely.
So, with that, I think we bring an end to a wonderful, wonderful discussion and a brilliant evening spent looking at some very beautiful art. Thank you so much, Sarang, for sharing that with us. And thank you so much for joining us for a very special week indeed. We've completed 9 years to Speaking Archaeologically yesterday. And this was our special Talk with an Expert session where we wanted to talk about how art merges with archaeology. Hopefully, with the discussion that we've had and the question and answers that we've had at the end, I think it makes more sense to you on how archaeology and art history combine together to give birth to something which is much larger and which gives us a better insight into what was going on in the past and what resulted in the creation of art to begin with, rather than just the artistic will and fancy to do certain things a certain way. Of course, there was human agency involved, but there are other factors as well, as the paintings clearly show us. So, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us tonight. In the group, I will be sharing the catalog that I mentioned. If you want to use it for your personal research, please feel free to do that. If you want to add to that or probably take information out of that, please feel free to do that. Remember, this is a free catalog. It's online. It charges you nothing. And you get all the cloud storage as well, plus all the data that researchers from around the world have compiled using that particular interface. So I'll be sharing the details with whoever's interested. And with that, I bring this session to a close. Thank you so much once again, Sarah. It was lovely chatting with you and lovely listening to you.
Likewise. Thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you. Have a good night. Bye bye.